So we're going to continue our overview of the nervous system. So we've been talking about the main parts of a neuron. Remember, those glia cells are all around the neuron and they're helping in all those ways. But the main parts of the neuron itself are the dendrites, which is where that information comes in. You've got the cell body, which is kind of processing where those sodium is flowing through. And then you have the axon, and so that is where that action potential will go through. And then we'll be talking about what happens at the axon terminal. So you don't just have one neuron, you have hundreds of neurons that are firing in one location. I mean, you've got thousands and thousands of them in your body. So we're going to talk about what if you have a bundle of them in either the central nervous system or the peripheral nervous system. Remember, the central nervous system is just your brain and your spinal cord, and then peripheral nervous system is everything else. It may start in the brain, but it goes out to your extremities, etc. So let's look. And so in the central nervous system, where we're going to hang out, so in your brain and in your spinal cord, if you get several cell bodies together, that's going to be called a nuclei. So not to be confused with that in chemistry, but or your cells. So if you put a bunch of cell bodies together, it's going to be called a nuclei in the central nervous system. If you get a bunch of axons, because if you have a bunch of cell bodies, there's going to become a bunch of axons as well. They're going to be called tracts. And so we're going to look, when we dissect the brain, we're going to see some tracts that will go back to the occipital lobe of your brain to allow you to see. So bundle of cell bodies, nuclei, bundle of axons are called tracts. That is in the central nervous system. So when we cut into the brain and etc., we will notice that we see some different colors going on. You see the darker here, and then you see a lighter part here. So that is known as white matter and gray matter. So the white that you're seeing, all this out here, is because you're looking at the axons. And not only is it just axons that we're looking at there, it's myelinated. Remember, myelinated means it has that cushioning fatty material wrapped around it. And so myelinated means it's going to help it fire faster. So if it's white matter, it's myelinated. So gray matter is not myelinated. It's unmyelinated. Still those axons that we're seeing. It says unmyelinated gives a grayish appearance when we cut into it. So this is all unmyelinated, and this is all myelinated. The difference between white and gray matter. All right, so in the peripheral nervous system, so we're not talking about inside the spinal cord, but surrounding the spinal cord. So inside would be central. We're going to see some bundles of cell bodies, and we'll be looking at this. So anytime cell bodies come together here, they form what's called a ganglia. And so this is called the dorsal root ganglion is the word for one of them. Ganglia would be several of those. And so what that is in this location here, in the peripheral nervous system outside of the spinal cord, you're seeing a bunch of cell bodies gang up. And then if you get a bunch of axons, they're called nerves. So your cranial nerves are actually part of the peripheral nervous system, because a nerve is just a bunch of those axons together. So just like in joints, where you can classify your joints by their structure, you can do that for neurons as well. So we kind of draw all neurons as we call multipolar, but not all of them look like this. These are the most common ones. All your motor neurons, the ones that are going to fire on a muscle, are multipolar, and that's the ones that we will be concentrating as we're heading to the muscle system, these firing on it. But what that means is there's many dendrites around one cell body, and it leads to one axon here. Now we do have things coming off the axon, but there's only one central axon. That's called a multipolar. A bunch of dendrites coming off the cell body leading to one axon. And we will find these in the brain, in the spinal cord, which is the central nervous system, and then in the peripheral nervous system we'll find these in our motor neurons. Again, motor neurons are the neurons that are going to fire on muscles. And so if it's a bipolar, what we're going to see is that it's got the cell body in the middle, and it doesn't have like what we call a true dendrite coming off. It's got a dendritic process coming off this way and an axon coming off this way. So this is called bipolar, and I'm going to show you how you can figure out which one's which here in a moment when we go through those. So this is bipolar. You find bipolar neurons in your senses, special senses of your eyes, nose, and ears. So they're shaped a little different because of the way they interpret that. Unfortunately, we don't get to go into our special senses. We run out of time, especially now with 8 weeks. So we won't be looking at those, but I'd like you to know that bipolar are in your senses. And then we get the pseudo means false, unipolar, and we're going to find these on all the cranial nerves. We're going to see it in the dorsal root ganglia, and so all those sensory nerves that comes into your spinal cord, they're going to look like this. They're going to have a unipolar, so basically they have a cell body here, and it comes off and then they go off in 2 different directions. Why this is important, we get a bunch of those together, and that's going to make our ganglia that we're going to see on those spinal nerves. So one process attached to the cell body dividing into 2 branches is what a pseudo unipolar means, sorta only has 1 pole. So let me show you in your notes how that looks. All right, so this would be the picture that's in your notes. It's not the exact picture that I put on your test, but I'm going to give you a picture and you're going to have to tell me whether it's a bipolar, pseudo, unipolar, or multipolar, and then kind of know where these are found. Remember, the bipolar are found in your special senses. We're going to find these pseudo unipolar in sensory neurons where they make a ganglia, and the multipolar we're going to see in the brain, the spinal cord inside, and also in motor neurons. So these are the most common ones, your multipolar. So the way you can do this is you can just circle the cell body. Circle the cell body. Circle the cell body. So if you circle the cell body and then you just draw a line of things that are coming off of it. So can you see that there's 2 things coming off of this? This is bipolar. This one, I know there's 2 things going this way, but look, do you see this almost just like a 1? I know it splits, but right here it's kind of just like almost just a 1, which is why it's pseudo unipolar. And look at this one, it almost looks like a sun. There are many things, dendrites shooting off of that. So the one that looks like a sun is multipolar. The one, I don't know what that would call that, but it looks like kind of a body there. But there's only 1 thing heading down, and then if you draw up 2 bi. That's the easiest way to determine what type neuron you've got. Okay, all right, let's continue. So structural classification was how they're made, and functional is, well, what do they do? And so we have sensory neurons, and they're going to be taking the impulse towards the brain and spinal cord. So it's leaving the peripheral nervous system, going to the central nervous system. Those are unipolar. Remember, sensory is afferent. We said that on another video, but I'll keep saying that. So information always starts at a sensory neuron, and it heads towards your central nervous system and then relays to the motor neuron. So your motor neuron is efferent, and that's going to take the impulse away from the central nervous system towards what we call an effector, which is either a muscle or gland, and that's going to be in the peripheral nervous system. All motor neurons are multipolar. And then we had that interneuron, which is basically going to be the relay guy that's going to relay the information from sensory to the motor, and that is completely contained in the central nervous system. Again, that is that little relay interneuron, the one that's in between the other two. So in your notes it says to draw a simple neuron path, and so this is really this is the prettier picture. I'm going to draw a not so pretty picture with you, but you're welcome to draw the pretty picture. You're welcome to draw the not so pretty picture. I kind of drew a little bit one on another video, but so this is what's happening. We've got that sensory neuron, and there's that pseudo unipolar that comes in. This is part of the peripheral nervous system. It comes into like your spinal cord or maybe your brain, and so we are now in central nervous system land here with this interneuron. And it is then passing on that information to, and again, all that action potential stuff's happening, passing it on to this motor neuron that will then pass it on to a muscle. So let's draw a little bit simpler one. Okay, please don't make fun of my drawing, but you can write the words if you don't want to draw. All right, so here is our beginning one. This is our sensory. So maybe you touch something hot or something, you stump your toe, some sort of sensory comes in. This purple here is your spinal cord. So right now we are in the peripheral nervous system here. The sensory peripheral means outside of central nervous system. That signal gets put in, maybe going to your brain, maybe going to your spinal cord. So either way, this is your central nervous system. Notice that the interneuron stays completely inside the central nervous system at all times. The sensories do enter, the motors do exit, so they do come inside, but the key with the peripheral nervous system is they leave. So sensory comes in, interneuron, motor neuron, then you have your effector. Hopefully you could tell maybe that's a muscle. So if you remember, it's same. These are afferent and these are efferent. Efferent goes away from the central nervous system going to the effector. Afferent goes to. All right, that's finishing up with those notes.